Hey guys, what's up? This is Calm. I'm gonna do the 7th round of the FIDE World Rapid 2013 tournament. White is Ian Nepomniachtchi, 27-17. Black is Mamedyarov, 27-53. Just before I get into this game though, I want to take a quick overview of my thought process when I make videos. Because what I'm always thinking is why do people watch these videos? And I think they watch my videos in particular because they want to get better at chess, and they might also want to be entertained. That's another good reason to watch videos, and chess is interesting/entertaining to them. But I think maybe if you just want entertainment, you want to watch, Zivit's drunk videos or tilt videos or whatever. But I play very much to the knowledge aspect, just because I feel that I can give back that way a lot better. And I wouldn't be nearly as entertaining if I did the other side of it. But yeah, I mean, what I'm aiming to do is just to provide value to you guys, just in the form of giving you as much knowledge as I can, and that hopefully fulfills your aim when you're watching, as in trying to learn. But despite giving this value to you, I'm doing it somewhat selfishly. And when I say that, I mean, it's because it makes me feel good giving back that I'm making these videos, if you see what I mean there. Because I spent a few years coaching, and it's what my degree is in, and it's across many sports. And although the pay was, pretty bad, it was just a very rewarding feeling that you got out of it, that you helped someone, getting to achieve their aims. And I know in particular myself, I can get somewhat emo with regards to making these vids if I don't get, comments, and I don't help myself there because I'm so sporadic in posting them. But I got a message from PayPal the other day, and it just made me feel so good, that I want to show it to everyone. And I just want to know that I really do appreciate everyone who watches my videos, comments on them or whatever. Just if you're getting anything out of it and I'm helping you, that makes me feel good, so that's great. So this is the note I got. I've taken out the name just because I don't know if they want to be anonymous or not, but hi, just wanted to make a donation to support your excellent work on the Chess Videos site. Though I have no talent for chess, you really do help me improve my understanding of the game. Thank you. And with that there was a donation. Obviously it's not big, it isn't huge, but just the fact that someone would, send me something and thank me for it at the same time, it just shows that, to me, it just shows that, I'm appreciated for doing it. And again, although that's a selfish way of looking at things, it's just, yeah, it really made my day. I think so. I'm just very thankful to this person. And I'm definitely not asking for donations here, just to make that clear. I'm just making the comment that I'm on a little chess high because of this right now, and I wanted to share this enthusiasm with you and give it a public, albeit anonymous, thanks to this guy. Because, yeah, I mean, it really made my day when I read that in the morning. Before going off to do my days, whatever I did that day. It's yeah, it was just really nice. So anyway, into the video. Mamedyarov is black, and the previous games we've seen in this tournament, I think he's been played d4 against him each time. It's like d4, c4 setups, and Mamedyarov has responded via d5, c5. Already played the first move here, so it's e4, so we know we're going to get something different. Okay? I believe Mamedyarov plays Sicilian, but we'll see. Okay, no, c6. Knight f3, d5. Okay, so we're going to get a Caro-Kann. d4 would be a lot more common than knight f3. This is kind of like, when it can transpose into some lines of the Caro-Kann, like after d5 here, which was played, if you can play e5, you can also play d4, and white playing d4 that is, and transpose into kind of advanced line. But black also has the option of d4 there, so it can not transpose as well. So basically, if you're playing knight f3, you're more going for a sideline as opposed to the main lines, which is a shame because I also know how to play the Caro-Kann, so I might have been able to impart something knowledgeable there, but as it happens, probably not so much. So you'd expect knight c3 here, just protecting this pawn. Just play. I actually played a on the board game about 10 years ago where I started with one knight c3, because Morozevich had just played it, so obviously it must be amazing. Turns out not really. It's not terrible, but it's certainly not great. And you would transpose into this position if you got 1d5, and then you could, because you played 2e4 and then 2c6 was relatively common. You transpose into this, and in the case of d4, you'd now play knight e2 with the idea of knight g3, and just putting your pieces on the king's side is kind of like a weird King's Indian attack where you put your bishop on e2 as opposed to g2. It's okay, not great, as I said. But black suddenly doesn't have to do that. When I get this position playing the Caro-Kann now myself, I tend to play bishop g4 here. And the reason for that is because we've got pawns and light squares essentially, and in order to support this later on, generally what we do in the Caro-Kann is we play this pawn to e6, and that helps solidify this. So if we're going to have that kind of triangle formation there, we're going to want this bishop out of the way of it, because it's not going to add much to our game. It's going to be blocked in by the c6 pawn. If we move that before the bishop, and I'm not saying that it's worse than this knight, but certainly in the early stages of the game, this knight has far more utility, looking at the centre of the board, covering these two important squares, than this bishop is going to have when it's blocked in by its own pawns. So we'll see. You can also play just takes here. It's fine, you can play d4 like I mentioned before, or bishop g4. I wouldn't really expect anything else. Okay, bishop g4, h3. So the plan here is not to retreat the bishop generally to bishop h5, and then after g4, bishop g6. It's just to trade this knight off. Those kind of lines are not so good in this position, because I can play knight e5 and have the option of trading off his knight for this bishop whilst doubling our pawn structure. Whereas in this line where we just take here, our pawns are relatively stable. So I'd expect just a capture. Just what happens. Queen takes. Obviously we take back with the queen here because we don't want to ruin our pawn structure as white. Double upping our f pawns and leaving the h pawn isolated. So e6, just supporting this like I mentioned earlier, and d4. So d4 is kind of interesting. I mean, it's good because it gains control of the center. The thing that's interesting about it is because now if black takes on e4, which is not unreasonable, it means white has to recapture the queen, because otherwise queen takes d4. By moving the queen already to f3, recapturing here, and then taking on e4, it's just kind of, some extra moves spent with the queen in the opening that you generally wouldn't expect. And you can maybe count this queen takes f3 as not a move at all, because the bishop had to move twice from here to then capture on f3, but suddenly recapturing on e4 would be an extra move compared to white's normal, I guess, more common setups. So that's interesting. Other moves here could be like knight f6. I'd expect e5 in that case, maybe after bishop g5 first, bishop g5, bishop e7, e5. But black's usually fine with that because he plays this knight to d7, and then given that this pawn is on e5, he's able to go for c5 pushes later on, and this d5 pawn isn't under threat, leaving black with reasonable control over the center. And then we develop this knight here to the c6 square, which is no longer occupied by this pawn, and then it works well with this d7 knight here, and then knight queen b3, and if he takes on c5, we capture the bishop, and it can be good. It's kind of Frenchy, but we don't have our bad c8 bishop. So we'll see what it does. I'd expect that. I mean, you can play knight d7 or bishop e7, bishop e4 even, transpose to some French line without this bishop might be reasonable. Okay, so he takes here. Queen takes, so I'd expect knight f6 here, just because it attacks the queen, forces him into another move to the queen early. Yeah, played. Okay, and queen h4. Knight d7. Bishop e7, very reasonable here as well, just to have this kind of discovery on the queen. You know, threaten to win another tempo based on that. Maybe he wants to delay the development of this bishop until this bishop is moved. Because if this bishop goes to g5, then he may be fine with just playing knight d7 and wanting to put this bishop on d6. But if he puts this bishop on f4, maybe he does want to go for that discovery. So it's kind of like a delayed kind of move. Or I mean, bishop f4 doesn't really work at the moment because of the immediate queen takes d4, but it's just kind of in the future thing. You may also want to leave this bishop just because of the potential of bishop b4 at a later point, especially after this bishop is developed to a square that's not d2, because then we can threaten to take on c3. Again, we're in the pawn structure on this side. Knight bd7 was played. Bishop d3. This is the best square for this bishop from White's point of view. If we look from here, we can see that he has 1, 2, 3 open squares here, and it's facing h7. Obviously, if this moves, black castles can mate on h7 in combination with the queen. But generally, when you're developing the opening, you'd look for c4 as the main square for the bishop, especially in e4 openings. But the reason that is not as good here is because of this pawn blockade. Black's got an e6 and f7. Because if he gets this bishop here, it's kind of, you know, biting on granite phrase kind of thing. It's only got this one square ahead of it, as opposed to the 3 here. Yes, it can retreat to b3, but it's not particularly useful. Black's not really going to look to push out with e5 before he's castled at least, so d3 is definitely the right square for this bishop. But, you know, that might not be obvious to some people, because I never really know what level to aim these videos at, so I just kind of talk about all the obvious points that come out to me, and that can be somewhat advanced and somewhat basic. It's just, I mean, I was never really taught chess, I was always self-taught, so I always had to have a reason behind every move to like make sense of it, as opposed to just you know, be instructed properly and maybe learning the principles based on, I don't know, the most optimal way to learn it. I was just kind of, you know, play and see what makes sense kind of thing. Okay, knight d5, so I'd have expected a bishop move here, just because we haven't developed this piece yet, and we have developed this knight. So I'd have expected bishop e7, bishop e4, or bishop d6. Probably. Yeah, I mean, it's just not really a move I considered. I mean, after he's played it, I can see that the idea is that if white trades off queens, which I think he's probably quite likely to do, because he's already moved this queen so many times, and black recaptures with the rook, his rook is on this half-open d-file, and by half-open I mean we don't have the pawn in the way, but white does, so we can attack that. But at the same time it simplifies a lot. And you can say that's good for black, because white spent so much time moving this queen, and if white declines this queen trade, by playing say queen g3 or something, knight b4 is really awkward to meet for white, because we're threatening to take off this bishop, which would get rid of the 2 bishop advantage that white has right now, because we trade off our g4 bishop for the f3 knight, if you remember earlier. So I think white has nothing better than trading, but yeah, so I guess that's something like I can pick up and learn from this, because I would have been just thinking about developing this piece because we haven't developed it yet. But perhaps Mamedyarov better understands, well of course he better understands, but perhaps in this position specifically, he better understands that this time wasted from white allows us to go into these more simple positions, where white's going to have no edge at all really. He'll have the 2 bishops, but that's it. And I think well, I still think white will be a little better because of having these two bishops, but Mamedyarov is just aiming to simplify the position really early on. In a position where he's black, knight moves in, so you can't particularly blame him. Against another 2700 player. But yeah, personally I would have been looking to develop this bishop, like probably bishop e7 is what I have played, or bishop e4. But yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily think that this move is better. I think it's probably about the same as my move. I just think that I wouldn't have considered this move, and probably that in itself is bad, because it shows that he is more aware of the overall simplifying concept that he can get away with early on in the opening by moving his opening piece twice, based on the multiple opening moves that white has done with his queen. I think I explained that pretty terribly, but hopefully you get what I meant by the end of it. Okay, so white does trade. Taking back with the rook is the only thing that makes sense to me, because we're still going to want a castle despite trading the queens, because white's still got two bishops, so it's kind of open-ish, especially in the dark squares. So this is played, and white actually trades the knights now, probably because he just doesn't want to deal with knight b4. If you play a3, black's just going to take on c3 and ruin his pawn structure, so I guess it's the best move. So it's played. Now, here, I think to most people it looks like it doesn't make much difference what pawn you take with, but I actually think taking with the c-pawn is significantly better than taking with the e-pawn. The reason for that is because we'll then have a half-open c-file, as opposed to having a completely open e-file. What this means is that we're going to be able to exert pressure on this backwards c-pawn of white's. Whereas if we take with the e-pawn, there's just nothing there, so we're not going to be able to extract an advantage from that. Whereas if we take the c-pawn, we put our rook on c8, we can build up pressure on the c-pawn. He can just play c3 and prevent it for the most part, but it still gives us something to attack later on with, like, the combination of b5, a4 and b4. We'll be able to undermine that pawn. Or maybe in that case you push c4 when d4 becomes weaker because you can't push that without us taking it off, and this then can't be defended with a pawn behind it. So we're kind of creating a long-term pawn potential for attack. It's not really a weakness, but it's just, there to attack. And this is way early on of establishing our mid-game kind of plans, which I know a lot of people kind of struggle with in the mid kind of levels. Just constructing a pat-land with relatively equal material, not so obvious kind of ball positions. Obviously if he takes with the e-pawn here, my point is probably wrong, but I don't. No, okay, so he takes with the c-pawn, which is what I said, so I'm happy. a4, okay. So it's just trying to gain space here. Could potentially push a5, a4, a3 in the future. And if we're forced to play b6, it kind of ties up our knight a little and makes these light squares better for his bishop. And remember that we have no light squared bishop, so if we play b6 and create more light squared holes, that's going to be better late game for white. At the same time, if we play a5 to stop it, again this bishop can go b5, and then we're not going to be able to push it away with a pawn, which could be awkward. If we play a6, then a5 can still be played, and then b6 is kind of an awkward point of contention. Long term, white may be able to attack this backwards b-pawn via some kind of rook lift. If we ignore this bishop here for the moment, we could play rook a3 to b3 and start putting pressure on it this way. Obviously we can't with this bishop, but if we manage to trade these dark square bishops somehow, that could be a way for white to look for an edge in future. In this position, I think it's pretty equal, but I'd still take white personally because of the two bishops. Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that a4 was played immediately though. I think I'd have played bishop f4 just to stop bishop d6 from black, because this looks like it covers a lot of squares, and from white's point of view it looks like this would be very useful to have this bishop, because preventing, say, a rook to b8 in that kind of later scenario where we can get a rook to b3 to put pressure could be very useful, especially since if we put this bishop here, black's bishop d6, which he wants to play at some point, is very awkward to kind of do without moving this knight first, and the only really good square of putting this, when we know that the attack's going to come on the queen side, where white has kind of the majority of pawns, because he has 4 here against 3 of black's, is via b8. Because if we put it on b6 to restrict our b pawn, if we put it on f6, you know, it's over the king, but we can't really attack anything because we don't have queens. So yeah, but a4 was played. These players are obviously much better than me. Maybe they're just doing it based on something I've missed. Black does play bishop d6. So yeah, I don't think this bishop can go to as quite an optimal place as they could otherwise. And he might have to put himself on somewhere like e3, or if he goes to g5, it's not so exciting because h6, push away g5, then we can double the pawns in the g file, so probably won't do that. So a5 is played. So it'll be interesting to see what Mamedyarov does here. As I said, this can get a bit awkward if we play a6, which I think, although it left this pawn weak, was maybe the best of the options I was suggesting. Well, no, I mean, if he plays a6, probably playing b6 is better. Allowing bishop b5, probably not that big an issue actually, but still not perfect. But yeah, I guess I'm most interested to know here what black's going to do with his knight, because he can't play knight b6 because his pawn prevents it, which can be another reason for white doing this pawn push. He just wants to prevent this knight controlling the c4 square, which can be useful for black later on if you can, you know, put this knight here. It can be annoying in many positions. Personally, I don't think it would be as bad here, because just b3 would push it away, but in the eventual case of a pawn push via b4, b5 kind of thing, then it could be very good. Okay, knight b8 is played. So that is interesting to me. I guess well, okay, so here's my problem. With knight b8, if white now plays a6, you would think that the idea of knight b8 is just that we trade everything. We take on a6, bishop takes, knight takes, rook takes. This may look fine, and it probably is fine, because we have even material with same coloured bishops and so on. We can defend this pawn via rook a8, well, not rook a8 because bishop hangs on d6, but rook d7. And then later we can play probably king e7, but also maybe castles, and this rook to a8, and defend this pawn. But what I would say is that this a pawn is then very weak. There's no way to support it with another pawn. This rook is already on a6, so it can't move forwards. Yes, it can be protected by bishop b8, but that's kind of awkward, because if we were rook on a8, then we're blocking in our own rook. And if we don't, we just play this to b8, it can be removed anyway via bishop f4 later on. This bishop f4 doesn't have to come with the negative side of doubling our pawns after g3 bishop f4. We can actually play very safely in this position, king e2 to king f3 and then bishop f4, and then trade off via that, so our king gets in a more active square. These light square bishops go, dark square bishops, sorry, and then this a7 pawn is weak, and we kind of have to sit on it. We're going to have to move our king to b7 to help protect it in order to be able to move our rooks away, which means all the aggression is going to come from white. And white is going to be very quick to form an attack on this a7 pawn, because he's already got a half open a file by not having his a pawn here because of these trades on a6. And if he's doing this king e2, bishop f4 plan, king e2, king f3, bishop f4, and this rook can go to a1 in one move. It just comes very quickly. It's very awkward to deal with. I think white would have, you know, far from winning advantage, but he'd certainly have all the pressure going on in the position, which basically means black's not going to be able to play for a win at any point, unless white makes some mistake. It's just very slow, nagging pressure. So because of all that, I don't think that knight b8 should be used, purely thinking of the a6 push. So I think if a6 is played, we should play b6 still, which means that knight b8 is purely for bishop c6, which is a better square to have the knight on than d7, because it attacks d4, and it's slightly more central because it's, you know, forward upper row, so, you know, it has more central influence, as opposed to having more influence around our black pieces by being, you know, one square further back, which is only really useful defensively, whereas having the knight nearer the middle of the board is, you know, more multi-purpose, which is just overall better in positions where you're not having to defend. So that's a very long-winded explanation on knight b8, but, you know, there you go. Actually, this video has already been 26 minutes, so I think I gotta really, really speed it up, because I don't think people realistically watch longer than half-hour videos. Certainly not in one session, anyway. Okay, so c3 is played, and now a6 is played. Okay, so fine. This can combine fine with knight c6. It does have this problem of leaving this b7 pawn a bit more vulnerable to this kind of rook lift in the future, but yeah, not as much of an issue. Maybe having this pawn as a weakness instead of a7, like I explained in the previous line, is better, because this light square bishop can't get in a position to attack this pawn whilst we still have this pawn on d5. And it's slightly closer to the king to protect here, doesn't tie up our defense isn't dependent on having this d6 bishop, which it, you know, arguably was in the other line. Okay, so b4, rook c8, bishop d2, and now e5. Okay. So long term, white was just planning to maybe castle, maybe just move the king up this way, then put his pieces around the C and B files, push these pawns, make this a pawn pass, or like trade them off, and penetrate his rooks down these kind of sides, you know. As the position opens up, two bishops generally become stronger. That might be all the reason he needs to go for that kind of plan, because there's nothing really concrete that you can go after in such a position, it seems. So black's kind of responding against that with the e5 push. To me it looks a bit weird, because generally when you open up the position, you want to be the one with the two bishops, because bishops work well in open positions, and unless the knight is right in the middle of the board, which is absolutely not here, then you're not going to be able to utilize your pieces as effectively. But I'm guessing the idea from Mamedyarov here is that because he's going to get immediate pressure on this c3 pawn, or he's going to be able to take on d4, and then after the recapture play knight c6, which double attacks this d4 and b4 pawns. He's going to be able to get away with this move so early, and that'll just stop white's, you know, long-term plans of pushing these pawns, you know, very early on. And if you manage to kill this counterplay before it even starts, then you should be in a great spot. So So we'll see what happens, what it takes. Rook c1 kind of forced, just hold on to this. Castles, castles. Bishop f6. He doesn't want to be attacked via, rook e1, which is a very natural move because it, it takes the open file. Rook d1 was played instead. He's going after this, weakness of this pawn. So I would imagine that Mamedyarov's got to play for some quick d4 move, because personally I would really hate having this isolated pawn here. And I think the only reason you go for isolated pawns in kind of the timing that he did is because he believes he can trade this off in a position to where white can't get slow pressure against it. And I think he's right. Because if he plays d4 now, he just has the option of taking here, it'll be fine. That said, if he plays d4 and white can play c4, I think that could get a little awkward because white can then play b4, and then, c4 and c6 and try and push through a pass pawn there with his 3-2 majority. Knight c6 is played. Bishop e1. I mean, this may look like a very strange move. It's not something I'd really consider, but I can see the reasoning behind it, which is just getting a piece out the way for this rook, so it's easier to attack this pawn. g6 is played. This opens up space for the king. That's a retreat square for the bishop. Probably more for the king. It's interesting to me that Mamedyarov's is waiting and not pushing this pawn. Maybe he feels he can just do it at any point, or maybe he feels like he should keep it there to prevent this c4 plan. Either way, I definitely think white's a bit better here. King f1, rook fd8 makes a lot of sense. This rook's not doing anything here. Here it supports this pawn. Bishop e2, bishop g5 attacks the rook. Rook b1, d4. Okay, so now he plays it. So c4, then maybe the idea here is knight e5. Yeah, that looks good because it attacks the c4 pawn twice. It's awkward for white to defend it because he can't play a rook to c1 because of this bishop. And also next move we're threatening d3, which would cut off this bishop, which also cut off another defender to c4. So actually, it seems that white now can't play c4, so maybe Mamedjarov just had that worked out all along from the previous position, and he realised he can get this bishop in a position whereby white wouldn't be able to push c4 so easily, so this is completely fine. I somewhat doubt it, despite the high level that they play at, just because it's a rapid game, which I think decreases their potential for long-term thought a lot, still. More of just being like an intuitive feeling he has from playing so much chess in the past. Yeah. Okay, so b5 was played. Interesting. Knight's under attack, so either we take on b5 or we take on a5. Taking on b5 to me looks a lot better, because if you take on a5 then he takes on a6, and after the recapture of this, the bishop then capture on a6, stacks the rook. And if then the rook moves, this bishop just on a6 is in general in a lot happier position than if black's able to force in d3, which would completely block this bishop for the time being. I mean, he can go to bishop f3, but still it limits white's potential a lot, and we're always threatening d2, which completely traps this bishop here. In fact, just wins it, so that's probably the main concern. So black does take, and rook takes b5 is played. So now if d3, obviously we can't do that because the knight's not on e5, so we can just take on d3. This bishop on g5 is currently under attack, so I'd expect him to move that. probably just bishop f6. Let's pull this d4 pawn. Okay. Huh. Okay, so the idea here is that he's sacking this g5 bishop, because if rook takes g5, then he can play c2, I guess. Or maybe he trades the rooks first, then plays c2, then bishop takes. So I guess the idea is actually knight d4. Well, I mean, I guess rook takes g5, c2, rook has to be where it's taken, rook c2, knight d4, protects the c2 pawn, it's also protected by this. And then the idea is that he can play knight b3 next move. There's no, rook back to b5 to prevent this, because this knight covers this b4 square. And if he can play knight c2 move after, his rook has nowhere to go to prevent the queening of this pawn, so it kind of, basically just dies. And if it just dies, then the best he can do is take this pawn for it, which means black will be getting a rook for the bishop and the pawn, which would be good for him. That's like not an easy line to calculate, especially at these speeds, but that's why these players are like so much better. I'm not sure that's completely correct, but we'll check it with an engine at the end, but I really need to speed up this commentary, so let's just go. Those are my initial thoughts in anyway. So white just takes on c3, so that's kind of even material, just keep everything as it is. b7 is weak in this position, a5 is better, because if all the pieces are traded, it's just king and pawn in game, white's going to have the advantage because he's going to have the outside pass pawn, which generally means he wins. Rook trade. Yeah, 306 bishop, so bishop trades. I think this endgame is better for white, because there's pawns on both sides of the board, and generally that favours the bishop. When the pawns are all on one side, if we took off the A and B pawns, having the knight would be better, although maybe not in this position, because the bishop's really strong looking through this kind of only diagonal square the black's king has, because it can cover more squares in a small area. Bishops cover more squares in a much larger area, and that just generally makes me think that this endgame should be better for white. I'm not sure that it's winning, but definitely better for white. Rook d7, as you can see, black's going to get passive in it, because it's the only thing he can do. And white's just gaining space. Putting the rook on the b file makes a lot of sense, just attacking this initially. Black gets more passive. Putting pressure on f6 here. Black checks and defends with the rook. White wants to keep the rook because his rook is more active than this rook. You can say he's better at winning chances once he trades the rooks. That's only the case if his king is in a position where black's king can't block out his king from getting to this b6 square and being able to win based on his outside pass pawn. This king is just getting closer, again taking more space. Bishop in the perfect position, this knight's super passive. Now he's just looking to break through on the square. Okay, so g5 is kind of like, it's a move you have to make, or the other option would be just to leave it, but there's not many actually moves for black here. He can't promote his king because bishop takes f6, he can't move his knight because it protects b7, he can't move his rook off to the 6th rank because it protects f6. But the problem with playing I mean, if he takes here, the problem is white can take with the king. These pawns are isolated, they're gonna fall because of the bishop and the king. If he takes with the pawn, it's also good for white because he can swing this rook round here. and this rook is still passively defending f6, so white can penetrate, so both of them are good for white. By playing g5, it leaves me feeling that he can get, in 6-1, because he always has so few moves rather, that I would start to become very concerned about that anyway. Bishop c5, king back, king forwards, king back, rook across, rook back. Maybe it's the case that white doesn't have any moves to penetrate, but I just have a feeling like he should, because if he puts this bishop on b6, then this pawn is protected. The knight is so far away from being able to attack it because it's on a diagonal 2 squares away, which, if you didn't know, it takes like 1, 2, 3, 4 moves to actually be able to take a piece 2 away on a diagonal like that, if you're a knight. That I feel like this rook should be able to penetrate in combination with the king. I guess we'll see. Because the rook goes back now, and now bishop b6. Okay, so this is very interesting. White is now trading his bishop for that passive knight. And that tells me that he thinks his king is in a position to where he can win the game. Because otherwise, why would you give up the slow pressure? If it's going to be a draw, you can just agree a draw. Why would you trade it? Assuming draw offers aren't allowed. I feel like this just feels like it should be better for white now. So, yeah, I mean, bishop takes, rook takes with the check, king goes to c5, like rook d7 to defend, but then rook b6, and white has progressed because this king can no longer get back to the 6th rank. So I feel like something like that could happen. And then the king can go to b5 maybe. Basically, if the king gets to b6, I feel like it should be over. Because if we've got our rook on, say, the 5th rank, or the c file, sorry, and we've got our king on b6, then we'll always be able to play rook c7 and force the trade-off of rooks whilst our king is in a better position to take advantage of b7 whilst we have the outside pass pawn. And that should mean we can win. Maybe that's not so obvious, maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. Let's see. Jack, king c5, rook d7, rook b6, yeah. So we can put our rook on like e6 with check maybe, and then bring our king into this b6 square, and then maneuver our rook back to the c file somehow. Check, king b5, king back, yep, so rook d6 now. Check. Okay, so our king's in b6. Yeah, and now we're maneuvering this to c7. Black's king's cut off, this looks like white's gonna win. h5 is played, rook c3, h6 g4, recaptures. And okay, the game is actually over here, so let's check. Yeah, 1-0, so our hero Mamedyarov here has actually lost this game, so that's not great, but it was a very well played game from white, I think. I was a bit confused. I'm not confused, but surprised with the choices of Mamedyarov at some points. Like, okay, so let's just run through. Okay, but in this end position, just maybe I should show it. I mean, just after this, we're going to pick up this b pawn, right? And then we're just going to push this a pawn and win. So black gets to take, and then can't do anything. White's going to capture this and then promote and win. Hopefully that's pretty much obvious. So let's just have a quick look through. Yeah, I was a bit surprised by this, but it's probably good. This I thought was interestingly quick from white. This knight b8, sure. e5 is interesting. All this kind of stuff, it looked like Mamedyarov was slowly untangling his problems. But I think when White got in this b5 move, he started to get a lot of pressure, and the way Black kind of defended from that was via tricks, because here he's just forked the bishop on g5 and the pawn on b7, so maybe he felt like he had to. Probably very sensible here in just recapturing on c3, like keeping that advantage. And the endgame, I said it felt a little bit better for White. Definitely was, but the way he actually managed to penetrate is very, I think, instructional. It's very simple, but very well done, I guess, because there's no reason to rush as White in these positions, but he managed to convert it, which is always a big thing. And knowing when to take this is hugely important, and he'd waited until he got his king on this 5th rank. That's basically what won the game for him, I think, so... Yeah, anyway guys, this was Calm. I hope you enjoyed that commentary. I'll come back to you with the 8th soon, whilst I'm still on this little chess high. Thank you for watching. I think I'm going to start posting the PGNs maybe. It's the first post of every thread, and then so you can look through yourselves if you want. Because they're not the easiest to find if you don't have a big database. Yeah, any questions, let me know, and I'll try and respond as best as I can. As I say, these videos are all for you guys. You know, feel free to mooch off me and try to learn as much as you can, and as I say, I feel really good helping, so hope you enjoyed the commentary. I'll see you guys next time.